He dragged the window across the projector screen like a magician about to saw a woman in half. "Watch this." He grinned, his voice greased with arrogance. "Legacy code is holding us back." Then he hit delete, just like that. 2,000 lines I'd written, painstakingly modular, resilient, ugly as hell, and twice as stubborn, were gone in one flashy keystroke while 45 engineers clapped like trained seals. My name wasn't on the file anymore, but that code was mine. It got us through Black Friday logins, tax season spikes, a data center fire that almost took out half the West Coast session traffic. And now it was a punchline. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and answered the call I'd been dodging all week. "Yes," I said, loud enough to carry. "I accept the offer. 670K, full autonomy, remote optional." The room kept laughing, but it wasn't for me anymore. The CTO, Corey, with his second-hand swagger and his one-term startup exit, smiled like he'd won something. He had no idea what he'd just deleted. Not really. "Hey, quick thing before we keep going. 97% of people who listen to these stories forget to subscribe. If you're still here, you're clearly into it. Hit the like, tap subscribe. It genuinely keeps us going and helps more folks hear these insane real stories." Okay, back in. I stood there as he basked, eyes flicking between the screen and the room like a dog expecting a treat. "Dead weight," he called it again, like a priest exorcising a ghost. I'd written that dead weight during 2 a.m. triage sessions with a half shot of Dayquil in one hand and a deployment monitor in the other, because we couldn't afford downtime then, not with the revenue margins as tight as Corey's jeans. But to him, all that mattered was the optics. Flashy dashboard, clean slate. My team, my stack, he'd told the board a month ago, and now it was his mess. I walked out without the theatrics. No slammed laptop, no speeches. Just a quiet click of the badge reader and the soft thud of my office plant against my hip as I carried it down the hallway like a widow with flowers. People pretended not to notice. One guy, Ryan from API, gave me that look you give someone whose dog just got put down. Sympathy with a side of silence. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop on instinct. Reflex. Old habits from years of ops alerts and log spikes. I navigated to the internal wiki, found the page nobody ever looked at, the one titled "Why This Old Stuff Exists," and double-checked the timestamp. Created by me. Last edited by me, signed, dated, detailed, each safeguard, each stupid cron job, each flaky module with a reason behind it. Not art, but armor. And now armor in the trash. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I stared at the soft pulse of the apartment router and waited for the sound that always comes next after someone thinks the quiet one won't be missed. Sirens. They wouldn't hear them until 3 a.m., but they were already on the way. The email wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Subject line, Systems Impact Summary, Off-Board Notes. 5 bullet points, each dry as lint. I listed what had been removed during the demo. Not by name, Corey wanted fanfare, not documentation, but by function. Session lifecycle scripts deprecated, billing gate delays removed, restart sequencing disabled, legacy safeguards bypassed, and so on. No blame, just facts. Just the kind of facts that become fossils when a company goes digging for where the outage started. I attached the diagram nobody ever cared about, a boring little SVG flowchart I made after our third multi-region failover panic, color-coded, annotated, ignored. Then I included a list of components affected by the removed code, marked with confidence levels. High, medium, unknown. I almost left that part out, but that would have been ego, and I was done letting ego run anything. Not mine, not his. At the very bottom, I wrote, "This is not a warning. This is a record." Underneath it all, like the cherry on a grenade, sat Corey's earlier reply to my internal Slack message from 3 days ago. I'd pinged him after he hinted at cleaning house during a dev sync. I'd said, "Just flagging. The legacy restart scripts gate billing and cache flush order. Removing them could cause inconsistencies or collisions." His reply, "Proceed. I'll take responsibility." I'd screenshotted it back then out of habit. Now it wrote in as Exhibit A, neatly tucked in the email thread like a landmine with a smiley face. Because that's what these guys never understand. Delete my code, mock my voice, but the second you reply in writing with that kind of arrogance, you give me the one thing louder than claps: your consent. I BCC'd my personal address, blind copied legal, and hit send. There, paper trail planted, growing roots in inboxes. It wasn't revenge. I wasn't trying to blow anything up. It was just ballast. If the ship went down, I wanted someone to find the black box and know I hadn't steered it into the reef. I returned the company laptop, badge, and the backup token I'd kept duct-taped inside a drawer. Took a photo of the empty desk. My box held a coffee mug, 2 pens, and a stack of Post-its with drawings from my niece. That was it. 3 years reduced to office detritus and a shipping label. Night came soft and smug. I microwaved a burrito, watched bad TV, but in the corner of my screen, the status dashboard from my old company pulsed amber. Not red. Not yet. But enough flickers to stir something in my stomach. Not nerves. Not pride either. More like the quiet dread you feel watching someone ride a bike downhill with no helmet and both hands off the bars. 3 a.m. would be the first checkpoint. That's when the nightly maintenance scripts used to run, the ones that Corey's ego just erased. Cache flush, user session reset, database sync drift checks. If those jobs didn't queue properly, the backlog would start crawling like a clot in the bloodstream. The kind of slow disaster that doesn't scream, it just smothers. I shut the laptop but didn't sleep. I didn't want to see what broke. I just wanted it on record that I didn't break it. I carried the damn pathos like it was my last paycheck. Wilted, droopy, clinging to the plastic pot like I just yanked it out of hospice. The box was nearly empty otherwise. No photos, no trophies, just a mug I left behind because I couldn't stand the thought of it living in my kitchen, reminding me how many hours I lost sipping stale coffee in a place that only noticed me when something caught fire. One last badge swipe. One final chirp of the security reader. Then nothing. No goodbyes, no hallway glances, just that fluorescent hallway, silent as a morgue, swallowing me on the way out. Back home, I tossed the plant in the sink and cracked a beer I didn't want. The couch was colder than usual. My inbox was quiet. HR had already scrubbed me from the Slack workspace. I'd been erased with the same keystroke Corey used to wipe my code, except his left behind a crater. Mine just left dust. Out of muscle memory more than concern, I flipped open my personal laptop and typed in the public-facing status dashboard URL. I didn't even think about it, just muscle. Like checking a stove you already know you turned off. Everything looked green. Latency was slightly elevated on the EU cluster, but nothing screaming. Not yet. Still, I watched. Because you don't live in that job for 3 years without learning to smell smoke before there's flame. At 12:42 a.m., I saw the first ripple. Retry spikes. Minor. Just over the threshold. Barely noticeable unless you've sat through 4 a.m. outage calls where someone swears it's a false alarm right before the whole system eats its own tail. Login retries were creeping, like a leak behind drywall. And the worst part? No alerts, no public incident notice. Which meant someone on call was either asleep or, more likely, dismissing it as a blip. They'd say, "It self-corrected in the morning," not realizing it was already threading its way through the job queue. The thing about those safeguards they deleted, they weren't sexy. They didn't flash. They didn't show up in demos. But they staggered job triggers so that the entire system didn't try to wake up at the exact same second, like an army of toddlers screaming for cereal. Corey called that legacy lag. I called it physics. Systems need breathers. But to him, staggered triggers were just inefficiency, redundant. He wanted lean, clean, fast. He was about to get it. I didn't ping anyone, not yet. It wasn't my system anymore. But I stared at that latency graph like it owed me an apology. I could see where it was headed. A tight corner taken too fast. A snake swallowing itself. Whatever metaphor helped them sleep at night, it didn't change the math. The old code wasn't pretty, but it braked when the new stuff wanted to floor it. I closed the lid, leaned back, listened to the hum of my fridge, filling the silence like a soundtrack to a car crash I wasn't allowed to stop. I wasn't mad anymore, just detached, hollow. Not because I'd lost the job, I'd replaced that. Not because they humiliated me, my phone was still ringing with recruiter calls. No, the hollowness came from watching good people, smart, tired, loyal engineers get dragged behind a CTO chasing applause. Somewhere in that building, someone was sipping coffee and pretending nothing was wrong. And the system, ever obedient, was queuing up all its lovely mistakes for sunrise. At 1:18 a.m., I got the first Slack screenshot. No subject, no message, just a JPG from one of the junior engineers I used to mentor, sent from her personal email with nothing but a nervous emoji in the body. The thread read like every slow-motion disaster I'd ever lived through. Noticed some minor flake during the session restart jobs, someone had posted. Working as expected otherwise, low priority. A few thumbs up followed. One manager added, normal for week of deploy, just eyes on for now. That was code, not system code, engineer code. Minor flake meant they didn't fully understand what they were seeing, but they didn't want to be the first to say it. Working as expected otherwise meant no one had the guts to admit this wasn't expected at all. Just eyes on for now was how you watched a house burn from the porch because walking inside meant you'd be responsible for the bodies. I stared at the message long enough to memorize the names on it. They were all good people, smart people, but they'd been trained to minimize problems unless something physically caught fire. That's what Corey wanted. No noise, no blockers, no process, just deliverables and dopamine. He cut out anything that didn't sparkle in a demo, including the restart staggerer I'd built, probably my ugliest script. God, that thing was a monster. It looked like a nested octopus of if statements and delay queues and watchdog pings. Corey read half of it once and said it looked like a cry for help. Maybe it was, but it worked. It kept the system from waking up like a prison riot. Without it, every microservice that relied on staggered restarts would queue up at midnight like a kindergarten fire drill. One failed call would retry 3 times. 3 retries across 60 services multiplied like cancer. And it wasn't just concurrency, it was context loss. Half those jobs didn't remember state if the session failed twice. They just retried blind and stomped over each other. A mess. A subtle, quiet, recursive mess. Which meant that by 2 a.m., the system wouldn't just be slow. It'd be incoherent. Like a sentence someone tried to write during a seizure. I typed back to the junior, save all logs locally. Timestamp everything. If they ask questions later, don't guess. Just show. No reply. She was probably afraid even opening that email could get her in trouble. I didn't blame her. I'd been there. When you're at the bottom, the only thing management wants less than your complaints is your accuracy. And right now, accuracy meant calling Corey's showboat stunt what it really was. Sabotage by ego. At 2:03 a.m., another screenshot. CPU load rising and back-end off. Cache flush jobs showing status. Unknown. The bot that usually posted happy green check marks had started posting ellipses. Like even the bot didn't want to say it out loud. But Corey? Corey was quiet. Too quiet. I had no doubt he'd seen the graphs by now. He just hadn't found someone to blame yet. I opened my personal runbook archive, scrolled to the old section labeled Order of Operations, Post-Crash Recovery. Still there, still color-coded, still time-stamped from 6 months ago. A single note at the top. Do not run. Start all after midnight. Services will collide. They deleted that script, live, on a projector, for applause. Now the collisions were happening in silence, and sunrise was still hours away. At 3:07 a.m., the log-in storm hit like a dam giving out. Sessions spiked from normal overnight trickle to a burst pattern I hadn't seen since the pre-prod rollback of 22. It was always subtle at first, like snow piling on a roof. Silent. Harmless. Until it wasn't. The retries were stacking. 5, then 9, then exponential jumps across regional nodes. Each failed auth spawned 3 more, and since the stagger script was gone, they all screamed at once. By 3:18, billing froze. Not a delay, a full-on hang. In-app payments stalled mid-confirmation. Customers tapped submit and got spinning wheels. Behind the scenes, transaction packets stacked in limbo, half-written, half-synced, locked with no rollback path. Some were duplicated, others vanished. I recognized the pattern and felt my chest tighten. Not because I was on the hook, but because I'd seen this exact meltdown years ago. That's why I built the gate in the first place. At 4:02, the dashboard turned gray. Not red, gray. That was always the worst. Red meant alerts, response, action. But gray? Gray meant blind spots, services unreachable, monitoring tools themselves failing to load metrics, which meant the team was flying through smoke with no instruments. The internal joke was, gray is the color of prayer. Somewhere, an SRE was probably pounding Red Bulls and promising this wasn't what it looked like, that it was just a visibility gap. But visibility gaps don't come with failed transactions and dead auth headers. And then came the pager chorus. I wasn't on it anymore, but old habits die loud. I still had the custom alert tone in my archive. It started in my head first, a ghost sound. Then I realized it was coming from my backup work phone, still powered on in a drawer. Notifications stacked like bricks. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. They were in it now. I reopened the runbook archive and found the section they'd laughed about during sprint reviews. Order of operations, post-failure recovery. Highlighted in blue, the delay sequencing logic, the restart timing ladder, and the re-auth throttle. Ugly code. Defensive code. Code that worked. I copied the link and DM'd the junior engineer again. No lecture, no smugness, just, if you need a north arrow, this is where we used to start. She read it in under a minute. No reply, no reaction, just seen. And that was enough. Because if anyone in that building still gave a damn about more than optics, it was her. She didn't need a hero. She needed a breadcrumb trail out of the forest Corey set on fire. I sat back on the couch, the hum of the fridge louder now, not because it was louder, because everything else was finally quiet. No more laughter from that all hands, no more legacy jokes. No more polished bullshit about lean engineering from a guy who thought uptime was a given. The system was broken. Real people were locked out. Real money was in limbo. I wasn't happy, but there was a cold, iron satisfaction in knowing that the thing they called dead weight turned out to be the only thing that ever carried them. Someone, very soon, was going to demand a miracle, and someone else, even faster, was going to start lying about how it happened. But I had the receipts, the logs, the emails, the clip, and the silence was finally starting to feel like proof. At 6:14 a.m., the first lie hit the Slack channel like a wet cough in a chapel. Corey, no doubt pale, sweaty, trying to salvage the suit he slept in, posted a message in your engineering ops that read, Initial assessment. Legacy code may have introduced booby traps that triggered cascading failures during routine maintenance. Root cause analysis in progress. All hands on triage. Booby traps. That was the word he picked. Like I'd buried landmines in the stack for sport. Like my safeguards. The same ones that carried his fragile ego through 3 seamless quarterly rollouts had been some malicious prank I left behind on my way out the door. It wasn't just cowardice, it was strategy. Say it first. Say it loud and let the silence fill in the guilt. Within 5 minutes, my personal inbox pinged. Subject line, FWD statement from CTO. Sender, legal company. BCC'd, no comment. Just a lawyer's quiet way of saying, we're watching. Proceed carefully. I didn't flinch. I didn't panic. I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Contingency Do Not Touch. Inside was everything I'd never trusted their internal systems to keep safe. Email chains, Slack logs, PDF exports, signed deployment approvals, and right at the top, a 21-second clip from the all hands demo. Corey, sleeves rolled up, mouse hovering over the function. This is what we don't need anymore, he says, chuckling, and deletes it. Applause. Wide shot. 45 engineers. Laughter. I replied to legal. 1 sentence. No flourish, no fury. Per your incident clause 9.3.1b attached are 1. The recorded deletion of affected safeguards during public demo. 2. Slack approval from CTO explicitly assuming responsibility for removal. And 3. Full changelog and time-stamped impact summary submitted at time of departure. I attached the receipts. PDF, screenshot, video, click, click, click. Then I hit send and went back to sipping my coffee. Still in pajamas, still not their employee. The reply came within 20 minutes, not from legal, from the board's executive assistant. Would you be available today at 9 a.m. to advise the board on current incident response pathways? Not fix, not join, not apologize, advise. Because now they needed something Corey didn't have, a map. He'd blown out the guardrails, erased the caution signs, and paved over my work with buzzwords. Now the investors were panicking, the insurer was sniffing around for liability triggers, and the system was bleeding out in gray waves. But me? I had silence. Signatures, sequence charts, I had discipline. And nothing shuts down narrative warfare faster than a bulletproof chain of custody. By the time their executive bridge lit up for the emergency call, half the company was in chaos mode. Engineers yanking cables that weren't even plugged in. Customer success spinning stories about data center turbulence. The CFO reportedly threw a stapler when billing reconciliation came back with a negative balance and a note that said, unprocessable entry, retry limit exceeded. But I didn't yell. Didn't gloat. I showed up on the bridge call with my camera off and my archive open. When they asked what happened, I walked them through the facts. What was removed, why it mattered, when I flagged it, who approved it, one page at a time. The CTO tried to interrupt twice, but someone muted him. Someone. I didn't ask who. The insurer's rep finally spoke. We'll need documentation of approved change control prior to safeguard removal, per your policy. Silence. I said, check the forwarded email, attachment labeled CTO override PDF. Click. Pause. Confirmed. And just like that, the booby trap story died in its crib. No more smoke, just mirrors, breaking. They called it a recovery bridge, but it felt more like a confession booth with too many witnesses and no priest. 9 people on video, 12 off. CEO with his jaw locked. Legal with her mic muted, Corey blinking like a man learning to breathe through his skin. Me, camera off, voice clear, archive open. I wasn't there to save anything. I was there to draw the map out of hell for the people still stuck in it. Start with the cash flush job, I said calmly, like I was ordering breakfast. Trigger it manually, stagger by region, EU, then East, then West, 30-second delays between each. Mia, the junior I'd mentored, was the only one clicking keys. Her voice shook, but her typing didn't. Confirmed. Cache flush initiated. East next. Delay queued. The system didn't roar back to life. It thumped. A heartbeat here, a return ping there. The sound of something battered trying to sit up in a burning room. Next? Someone asked. Probably the COO, or maybe the guy from investor relations who kept muting and unmuting like he thought that counted as helping. I scrolled. Billing pipeline restart, but throttle session link retries to 2 per user. The old script did that for you. Now you'll need to hard code it. Can we reinstall the old one? Mia asked carefully, like she already knew the answer but needed it said out loud. Yes, I replied. Rename it. Don't call it legacy restart. Call it stability layer. Upload it as a patch under the CTO's repo. Let him sign off on it. Dead silence. Then a few muffled coughs, but nobody laughed. Services are syncing, Mia reported. Auth latency dropping. Transaction IDs are holding. Color. Returning to green. I nodded, though no one could see it. Good. Don't trigger session recycle until after dashboard metrics stabilize. Run them cold for now. Let it breathe. That sentence alone took years to earn. Let it breathe. Most folks in that call wanted fireworks, drama, applause. Corey certainly did, still lurking on the call, probably debating whether to claim credit or hide under a couch. But systems don't come back to life with applause. They come back with precision, with patience, with protocols written by tired women at 2 a.m. 3 years ago who knew what happened when you let machines do too much at once. Anything else? The CEO finally asked. Yes, I said. Tell your insurer the rollback was completed using the documented sequence order outlined in my departure archive. The file was time-stamped. The instructions haven't changed since last year. No one argued. I closed the runbook on my screen and stood up. My knees cracked from sitting too long. I stretched, cracked my neck, and looked at the wall where my degree still hung. Crooked, dusty, but real. Do you want to come back? Someone asked. Maybe it was Mia. Maybe it was a board member trying to sound generous after bleeding cash for 6 hours. No, I said. I'm already somewhere better. The call didn't end with applause. It ended with quiet typing, the kind of reverent silence people make when they realize something bigger than them just walked out the door. And the system? It kept breathing, slowly, begrudgingly, but it breathed. The offer came by noon, not through Corey, he was radioactive by then, but through the head of People Ops, who sounded like she was reading from a hostage script. "We'd love to formally extend a rehire proposal," she said, voice tight with corporate enthusiasm. Same title, revised comp package, a seat at the new architecture review board, and she hesitated here, like the next part tasted bad. An apology. From leadership. I let the silence stretch until it stopped being polite. Then I replied, "No." She blinked. I could hear her force a smile. "If there's something you'd like amended—" "There are 3 things," I interrupted, calm as a surgeon. "None of them involve me returning." I laid them out. First, public credit for the team, not me, the team. Mia, the juniors, the ops lead who ran the restore under fire. Their names had been left off every internal memo so far. I wanted them listed, thanked, and backed with retention bonuses. Not pizza, not gift cards, real acknowledgement. The kind that lives in performance reviews, not Slack emojis. Second, Corey. Benched. Officially, pending a full review of his decisions, his sign-offs, and the gaps in the change control logs. I didn't need him fired. I needed him disarmed. If he kept access, he'd keep spinning, and they'd keep bleeding. Third, policy. In writing, effective immediately. No control, safeguard, or critical dependency is to be removed without a documented justification, a rollback plan, and 2 signatories, 1 technical, 1 legal. Period. No exceptions. I didn't care if it slowed them down. Speed without brakes is just a crash in progress. The HR rep was quiet. Then, finally, she said, "I'll escalate." "You do that," I replied, and ended the call. 3 hours later, legal sent me a draft of the official post-mortem. I read it slowly. Every word, every passive-voiced admission. And there, in Section 3, Contributing Factors, was a list that mirrored the one I'd written in my departure email, nearly word for word, even the phrasing. Legacy code was removed without documented review or rollback protocol. Safeguards were treated as redundant, despite their role in system timing and load balance. They didn't say my name. They didn't have to. It was all there. Later that night, Mia texted, "Your old page? Why this stuff exists? It's back. Same content. New title? Operational Stability Layer." They didn't even rewrite it. I smiled, just once. Not out of pride, out of recognition. That document was my signature, even without my name. And it didn't matter if it vanished from the repo someday. People like Mia had seen it. They'd saved it, carried it forward. That was enough. The insurer's final question was pending now. Who had authorized the deletion of the legacy controls? There'd only be one name next to approved removal, and it wouldn't be mine. They didn't need me in the room anymore. I'd already rearranged the furniture. The boardroom was full, but no one spoke. Phones silenced, eyes narrowed, tension coiled like a power line in a thunderstorm. Investors dialed in from cities where their mornings had started with financial alerts and media whispers. The insurer's rep sat in the corner, sharp-eyed and stainless, and at the head of the table, the board chair, knuckles white on the folder in front of him, flipping it open like it might explode. They were all there for one thing, one question. Who authorized removing the control? Not what caused the outage, not how do we recover. Just that. One cold question aimed like a scalpel, because in the eyes of the policy, everything else was theater. That authorization? That was liability. That was millions on the line. Corey cleared his throat, trying to look composed. The man had traded his hoodie for a blazer, but underneath he was still a startup mascot pretending to be an architect. "I believe there's some confusion," he began, lips pressed into a smile meant to disarm. The removal was part of a broader modernization effort. I reached into my folder and hit play. The clip was short. The room went still. On screen, Corey, sleeves rolled, standing at the all-hands demo. "This is what we don't need anymore," he said, voice smug and buoyant. His cursor hovered. Then, delete. The room in the video laughed. The room in real life did not. I let the silence hang, then slid a printout forward. His Slack reply from 3 days before the incident. Proceed. I'll take responsibility. The insurer's rep didn't flinch, just nodded. That's sufficient. She marked something on her clipboard. The chair exhaled like a man releasing a loaded gun from his lap. Someone near the window muttered, Christ. Corey didn't speak again. They processed the claim. The board formally adopted the policy I'd proposed verbatim. Controls, documentation, dual sign-offs, all of it. Not because it was genius, because it was now the only thing that could protect them from another $5 million burn in under a day. The chair offered me a handshake on the way out. If you ever want to, I don't, I said, not unkindly. Just, honestly, I didn't need a corner office in a company that once laughed as my work was erased. I had better now. I had a team that asked why before pushing buttons. I had a system that ran on principles, not power plays. When I got home, I checked the public repo out of curiosity. The legacy script was back. New label, operational stability layer. Same delay sequence, same timestamp logic, same conditional loops that used to make people roll their eyes. My name was stripped, of course. It wasn't personal. It was just branding. Legacy had become stability. I could live with that. On my desk sat the new badge from the company that had hired me before the smoke even cleared. Better title, better mandate, not more applause, just more clarity. Mia messaged me an hour later, "You were right. They renamed it, but it's still yours." I wrote back, "Doesn't have to be mine, just has to work." And that was it. Next morning, before logging in to my new team's onboarding call, I texted Mia one last thing. Legacy isn't old code. It's the reason we still have a company by morning. Then I closed the laptop. No applause, no vengeance, just quiet, just done.